Air-sealed, he said. I guess it just stayed the way it was years ago. Eddie shook his head. For years? Doc, I don't think so. Then what do you think explains it? Malcolm frowned, peering through the glass. How was it possible for a room this size to remain clean after so many years? It didn't make any... Hey, Eddie said. Malcolm saw it too. It was in the far corner of the room, a small blue box halfway up the wall, cables running into it. It was obviously some kind of electrical junction box. Mounted on the box was a tiny red light. It was glowing. This place has power. Thorne moved close to the glass, looking through with them. That's impossible. It must be some kind of stored charge or a battery. After 5 years, no battery can last that long, Eddie said. I'm telling you, Doc, this place has power. Arby stared at the monitor as white lettering slowly printed across the screen. Are you first-time user of the network? He typed yes. There was another pause. He waited. More letters slowly appeared. Your full name. He typed in his name. Do you want a password issued to you? You're kidding, he thought. This was going to be a snap. It was almost disappointing. He really thought Dr. Thorne would have been more clever. He typed yes. After a moment, your new password is VIG ***849 *. Please make a note of it. Sure thing, Arby thought. You bet I will. There was no paper on the desk in front of him. He patted his pockets, found a scrap of paper, and wrote it down. Please re-enter your password now. He typed in the series of characters and numbers. There was another pause, and then more printing appeared across the screen. The speed of the printing was oddly slow and halting at times. After all this time, maybe the system wasn't working very... Thank you. Password confirmed. The screen flashed and suddenly turned dark blue. There was an electronic chime, and then Arby's jaw dropped open as he stared at the screen, which read, International Genetic Technologies, Site B, Local Node Network Services. It didn't make any sense. How could there be a Site B network? InGen had closed Site B years ago. Arby had already read the documents. And InGen was out of business, long since bankrupt. What network, he thought. And how had he managed to get on it? The trailer wasn't connected to anything. There were no cables or anything, so it must be a radio network already on the island. Somehow, he'd managed to log onto it. But how could it exist? A radio network needed power, and there was no power here. Arby waited. Nothing happened. The words just sat there on the screen. He waited for a menu to come up, but one never did. Arby began to think that perhaps the system was defunct, or hung up. Maybe it just let you log on, and then nothing happened after that. Or maybe he thought he was supposed to do something. He did the simplest thing, which was to press return. He saw remote network services available. Current work files, research, production, field rec, maintenance, administration. Last modified, 10-2-89, 10-5-89, 10-9-89, 11-12-89, 11-11-89. Stored data files. Video network. So it really was an old system. Files hadn't been modified for years. Wondering if it still worked, he clicked on video network. And to his amazement, he saw the screen begin to fill with tiny video images. There were 15 in all, crowding the screen, showing views of various parts of the island. Most of the cameras seemed to be mounted high up in trees or something, and they showed... He stared. They showed dinosaurs. He squinted. It wasn't possible. These were movies or something, he was saying, because in one corner he saw a herd of triceratops. In an adjacent square, some green lizard-looking things in high grass with just their heads sticking up. In another, a single stegosaurus ambling along. They must be movies, he thought. The Dinosaur Channel. But then, in another image, Arby saw the two connected trailers standing in the clearing. He could see the black photovoltaic panels glistening on the roof. He almost imagined he could see himself through the window of the trailer. Oh, my God, he thought. And in another image, he saw Thorne and Malcolm and Eddie get quickly into the green Explorer and drive around the back of the laboratory, and he realized, with a shock, the pictures were all real.
That's okay. We went out to the store yesterday, so I'm just here to pick up
Power.
2 things.
Okay.
They drove the Explorer to the back of the main building, heading for the power station. On the way, they passed a little village to their right. Thorne saw 6 plantation-style cottages and a larger building marked Manager's Residence. It was clear that the cottages had once been nicely landscaped, but they were now overgrown, partially retaken by the jungle. In the center of the complex, they saw a tennis court, a drained swimming pool, a small gas pump in front of what looked like a little general store. Thorne said, "I wonder how many people they had here." Eddie said, "How do you know they're all gone?" "What do you mean?" "Doc, they have power. After all these years, there has to be an explanation for it." Eddie steered the car around the back of the loading bays and drove toward the power station directly ahead. The power station was a windowless, featureless concrete blockhouse marked only by a corrugated steel rim for ventilation around the top.
Yes.
The steel vents were long since rusted a uniform brown with flecks of yellow. Eddie drove the car around the block looking for a door. He found it at the back. It was a heavy steel door with a peeling, painted sign that said, "Caution, high voltage, do not enter." Eddie jumped out of the car and the others followed. Thorne sniffed the air. "Sulfur," he said. "Very strong," Malcolm said, nodding. Eddie tugged at the door. "Guys, I got a feeling." The door opened suddenly with a clang, banging against the concrete wall. Eddie peered into darkness inside. Thorne saw a dense maze of pipes, a trickle of steam coming out of the floor. The room was extremely hot. There was a loud, constant whirring sound. Eddie said, "I'll be damned." He walked forward, looking at the gauges, many of which were unreadable, the glass thickly coated with yellow. The joints of the pipes were also rimmed with yellow crust. Eddie wiped away some of the crust with his finger. "Amazing," he said. "Sulfur?" "Yeah, sulfur. Amazing." He turned toward the source of the sound, saw a large circular vent, a turbine inside. The turbine blades, spinning rapidly, were dull yellow. "And that's sulfur, too?" Thorne said. "No," Eddie said. "That must be gold. Those turbine blades are gold alloy." "Gold?" "Yeah, it would have to be very inert." He turned to Thorne. "You realize what all this is? It's incredible. So compact and efficient. Nobody has figured out how to do this. The technology is—" "You're saying it's geothermal?" Malcolm said. "That's right," Eddie said. "They've tapped a heat source here, probably gas or steam, which is piped up through the floor over there. Then the heat is used to boil water in a closed cycle, that's the network of pipes up there, and turn the turbine there, which makes electric power. Whatever the heat source, geothermal is almost always corrosive as hell. Most places, maintenance is brutal, but this plant still works. Amazing." Along one wall was a main panel which distributed power to the entire laboratory complex. The panel was flecked with mold and dented in several spots. "Doesn't look like anybody's been in here in years," he said, "and a lot of the power grid is dead, but the plant itself is still going. Incredible." Thorne coughed in the sulphurous air and walked back into the sunlight. He looked up at the rear of the laboratory. One of the loading bays seemed in good shape, but the other had collapsed. The glass at the rear of the building was shattered. Malcolm came to stand beside him. "I wonder if an animal hit the building." "You think an animal could do that much damage?" Malcolm nodded. "Some of these dinosaurs weigh 40, 50 tons. A single animal has the mass of a whole herd of elephants. That could easily be damaged from an animal, yes. You notice that path running there? That's a game trail going past the loading bays and down the hill. It could have been animals, yes." Thorne said, "Didn't they think of that when they released the animals in the first place?" "Oh, I'm sure they just planned to release them for a few weeks or months, then round them up when they were still juvenile. I doubt they ever thought they—" They were interrupted by a crackling electrical hiss, like static. It was coming from inside the Explorer. Behind them, Eddie hurried toward the car with a worried look. "I knew it," Eddie said. "Our communications module is frying. I knew we should have put in the other one." He opened the door to the Explorer and climbed in the passenger side, picked up the handset, pressed the automatic tuner. Through the windshield, he saw Thorne and Malcolm coming back toward the car. And then the transmission locked. "Into the car," said a scratchy voice. "Who is this?" "Dr. Thorne, Dr. Malcolm, get in the car." As Thorne arrived, Eddie said, "Doc, it's that damn kid." "What?" Thorne said. "It's Arby." Over the radio, Arby was saying, "Get in the car, I can see it coming." "What's he talking about?" Thorne said, frowning. "He's not here, is he? Is he on this island?" The radio crackled. "Yes, I'm here, Dr. Thorne." "But how the hell did he—" "Dr. Thorne, get in the car." Thorne turned purple with anger. He bunched his fists. How did that little son of a bitch manage to do this? He grabbed the handset from Eddie. "Arby, goddammit, it's coming!" Eddie said. "What's he talking about? He sounds completely hysterical." "I can see it on the television, Dr. Thorne." Malcolm looked around at the jungle. "Maybe we should get in the car," he said quietly. "What does he mean, television?" Thorne said. He was furious. Eddie said, "I don't know, Doc, but if he's got a feed in the trailer, we can see it too." He flicked on the dashboard monitor. He watched as the screen glowed to life. "That damn kid," Thorne said. "I'm going to wring his neck." "I thought you liked that kid," Malcolm said. "I do, but—" "Chaos at work," Malcolm said, shaking his head. Eddie was looking at the monitor. "Oh, shit," he said. On the tiny dashboard monitor, they had a view looking straight down at the powerful body of a Tyrannosaurus Rex as it moved up the game trail toward them. Its skin was a mottled reddish-brown, the color of dried blood. In dappled sunlight, they could clearly see the powerful muscles of its haunches. The animal moved quickly, without any sign of fear or hesitation. Staring, Thorne said, "Everybody in the car." The men climbed hurriedly in. On the monitor, the Tyrannosaur moved out of view of the camera. But sitting in the Explorer, they could hear it coming. The earth was shaking beneath them, swaying the car slightly. Thorne said, "Ian, what do you think we should do?" Malcolm didn't answer. He was frozen, staring forward, eyes blank. "Ian?" Thorne said. The radio clicked. Arby said, "Dr. Thorne, I've lost him on the monitor. Can you see him yet?" "Jesus," Eddie said. With astonishing speed, the Tyrannosaurus Rex burst into view, emerging from the foliage to the right of the Explorer. The animal was immense, the size of a two-story building, its head rising high above them, out of sight. Yet for such a large creature, it moved with incredible speed and agility. Thorne stared in stunned silence, waiting to see what would happen. He felt the car vibrate with each thundering footstep. Eddie moaned softly. But the Tyrannosaur ignored them. Continuing at the same rapid pace, it moved swiftly past the front of the Explorer. They hardly had a chance to see it before its big head and body disappeared into the foliage to the left. Now they saw only the thick, counterbalancing tail, some 7 feet in the air, swinging back and forth with each footstep as the animal moved on. So fast, Thorne thought. Fast. The giant animal had emerged, blocked their vision, and then was gone again. He was not accustomed to seeing something that big move so fast. Now there was only the tip of the tail swinging back and forth as the animal hurried away. Then the tail banged against the front of the Explorer with a loud, metallic clang, and the Tyrannosaur stopped. They heard a low, uncertain growl from the jungle. The tail swung back and forth in the air again, more tentatively. Soon enough, the tail brushed lightly against the radiator a second time. Now they saw the foliage to the left rustling and bending, and the tail was gone. Because the Tyrannosaur, Thorne realized, was coming back. Re-emerging from the jungle, it moved toward the car until it was standing directly in front of them. It growled again, a deep, rumbling sound, and turned its head slightly from side to look at this strange new object. Then it bent over, and Thorne could see that the Tyrannosaur had something in its mouth. He saw the legs of a creature dangling on both sides of the jaws. Flies buzzed in a thick cloud around the Tyrannosaur's head. Eddie moaned. "Oh, fuck." "Quiet," Thorne whispered. The Tyrannosaurus snorted and looked at the car. It bent lower and sniffed repeatedly, moving its head slightly to the left and right with each inhalation. Thorne realized it was smelling the radiator. It moved laterally and sniffed the tires. Then it lifted its huge head slowly until its eyes rose above the surface of the hood. It stared at them through the windshield. Its eyes blinked. The gaze was cold and reptilian. Thorne had the distinct impression that the Tyrannosaur was looking at them. Its eyes shifted from one person to the next. With its blunt nose, it pushed at the side of the car, rocking it slightly, as if testing its weight, measuring it as an opponent. Thorne gripped the steering wheel tightly and held his breath. And then, abruptly, the Tyrannosaur stepped away and walked to the front of the car. It turned its back on them, lifting its big tail high. The Tyrannosaur backed up toward them. They heard the tail scraping across the roof of the car. The rear haunches came closer. And then the Tyrannosaur sat down on the hood, tilting the vehicle, pushing the bumper into the ground with its enormous weight. At first it did not move, but simply sat there. Then, after a moment, it began to wriggle its hips back and forth in a quick motion, making the metal squeak. "What the hell?" Eddie said. The Tyrannosaur stood again. The car sprang back up, and Thorne saw thick white paste smeared across the hood. The Tyrannosaur immediately moved away, heading down the game trail, disappearing into the jungle. Behind them, they saw it emerge into the open again, stalk across the open compound. It lumbered behind the convenience store, passed between two of the cottages, and then disappeared from sight again. Thorne glanced at Eddie, who jerked his head toward Malcolm. Malcolm had not turned to watch the departing tyrannosaur. He was still staring forward, his body tense. "Ian?" Thorne said. He touched him on the shoulder. Malcolm said, "Is he gone?" "Yes, he's gone." Ian Malcolm's body relaxed, his shoulders dropping. He exhaled slowly. His head sagged to his chest. He took a deep breath and raised his head again. "You've got to admit," he said, "you don't see that every day." "Are you okay?" Thorne said. "Yeah, sure, I'm fine." He put his hand on his chest, feeling his heart. "Of course I'm fine. After all, that was just a small one." "Small?" Eddie said. "You call that thing small?" "Yes, for a tyrannosaur. Females are quite a bit larger. There's sexual dimorphism in tyrannosaurs. The females are bigger than the males, and it's generally thought they did most of the hunting. But we may find that out for ourselves." "Wait a minute," Eddie said. "What makes you so sure he was a male?" Malcolm pointed to the hood of the car, where the white paste now gave off a pungent odor. "He scent-marked territory." "So maybe females can also mark—" "Very likely they can," Malcolm said, "but anal scent glands are found only among males. And you saw how he did it." Eddie stared unhappily at the hood. "I hope we can get that stuff off," he said. "I brought some solvents, but I wasn't expecting, dino musk." The radio clicked. "Dr. Thorne?" Arby said. "Dr. Thorne, is everything all right?" "Yes, Arby, thanks to you," he said. "Then why are you waiting?" "Dr. Thorne? Didn't you see Dr. Levine?" "Not yet, no." Thorne reached for his sensor unit, but it had fallen to the floor. He bent over and picked it up. Levine's coordinates had changed. "He's moving." "I know he's moving. Dr. Thorne?" "Yes, Arby," Thorne said, and then he said, "Wait a minute. How do you know he's moving?" "Because I can see him," Arby said. "He's riding a bicycle." Kelly came into the front of the trailer, yawning and pushing her hair back from her face. "Who are you talking to, Arb?" She stared at the monitor and said, "Hey, pretty neat." "I got onto the Site B network," he said. "What network?" "It's a radio LAN, Kel. For some reason, it's still up." "Is that right? But how did—" "Kids," Thorne said over the radio, "if you don't mind, we're looking for Levine." Arby picked up the handset. "He's riding a bicycle down a path in the jungle. It's pretty steep and narrow. I think he's following the same path as a tyrannosaur," Kelly said. "As the what?" Thorne put the car in gear, driving away from the power station toward the worker compound. He went past the gas station and then between the cottages. He followed the same path the tyrannosaur had taken. The game trail was fairly wide, easy to follow. "We shouldn't have those kids here," Malcolm said gloomily. "It's not safe." "Not much we can do about it now," Thorne said. He clicked the radio. "Arby, do you see Levine now?" The car bounced through what had once been a flower bed and around the back of the manager's residence. It was a large two-story building built in a tropical colonial style with hardwood balconies all around the upper floor. Like the other houses, it was overgrown. The radio clicked. "Yes, Dr. Thorne, I see him." "Where is he?" "He's following the tyrannosaur on his bicycle." "Following the tyrannosaur," Malcolm sighed. "I should never have gotten involved with him." "We all agree on that," Thorne said. He accelerated, driving past a section of broken stone wall which seemed to mark the outer perimeter of the compound. The car plunged on into jungle, following the game trail. Over the radio, Arby said, "Do you see him yet?" "Not yet." The trail became progressively narrower, twisting as it ran down the hillside. They came around a curve and suddenly saw a fallen tree blocking the path. The tree had been denuded in the center, its branches stripped and broken, presumably because large animals had repeatedly stepped over it. Thorne braked to a stop in front of the tree. He got out and walked around to the back of the Explorer. "Doc," Eddie said, "let me do it." "No," Thorne said. "If anything happens, you're the only one who can repair the equipment. You're more important, especially now that we have the kids." Standing behind the car, Thorne lifted the motorcycle off the carrier hooks. He swung it down, checked the battery charge, and rolled it to the front of the car. He said to Malcolm, "Give me that rifle," and slung the rifle around his shoulder. Thorne took a headset from the dashboard and put it over his head. He clipped the battery pack to his belt, placed the microphone alongside his cheek. "You two go back to the trailer," Thorne said. "Take care of the kids." "But Doc," Eddie began. "Just do it," Thorne said, and lifted the motorcycle over the fallen tree. He set it down on the other side and climbed over himself. Then he saw the same pungent, pale secretions on the trunk. It had smeared on his hands. He glanced back at Malcolm questioningly. "Marking territory," Malcolm said. Great, Thorne said. Just great.
Yeah.
He wiped his hands on his trousers. Then he got on the motorcycle and drove off. Foliage slapped at Thorne's shoulders and legs as he drove down the game trail, following the tyrannosaur. The animal was somewhere up ahead, but he couldn't see it. He was driving fast. The radio headset crackled. Arby said, "Dr. Thorne, I can see you now." "Okay," Thorne said. It crackled again. "But I can't see Dr. Levine anymore," Arby said. He sounded worried. The electric motorcycle made hardly any noise, particularly going downhill. Up ahead, the game trail divided in two. Thorne stopped, leaned over the bike, looking at the muddy path. He saw the footprints of the tyrannosaur going off to the left, and he saw the thin line of the bicycle tires, also going off to the left. He took the left fork, but now he drove more slowly. 10 yards ahead, Thorne passed the partially eaten leg of a creature which lay at the side of the path. The leg was old. It was crawling with white maggots and flies. In the morning heat, the sharp smell was nauseating. He continued, but soon saw the skull of a large animal, some of the flesh and green skin still adhering to the bone. It, too, was covered with flies. Speaking into the microphone, he said, "I'm passing some partial carcasses." The radio crackled. Now he heard Malcolm say, "I was afraid of that." "Afraid of what?" "There may be a nest," Malcolm said. "Did you notice the carcass that the tyrannosaur had in its jaws? It was scavenged, but he hadn't eaten it. There's a good chance he was taking the food home, to a nest." "A tyrannosaur nest," Thorne said. "I'd be cautious," Malcolm said. Thorne slipped the bike into neutral and rolled the rest of the way down the hill. When the ground leveled out, he climbed off the motorcycle. He could feel the earth vibrate beneath his feet, and from the bushes ahead, he heard a deep, rumbling sound like the purr of a large jungle cat. Thorne looked around. He didn't see any sign of Levine's bicycle. Thorne unshouldered the rifle and gripped it in sweating hands. He heard the purring growl again, rising and falling. There was something odd about the sound. It took Thorne a moment to realize what it was. It came from more than one source, more than one big animal purring beyond the foliage directly ahead. Thorne bent over, picked up a handful of grass, and released it in the air. The grass blew back toward his legs. He was downwind. He slipped forward through the foliage. The ferns around him were huge and dense, but up ahead he could see sunlight shining through from a clearing beyond. The sound of purring was very loud now. There was another sound as well, an odd squeaking sound. It was high-pitched, and at first sounded almost mechanical, like a squeaking wheel. Thorne hesitated. Then, very slowly, he lowered a frond. And he stared.
I didn't make it all, like, even the mountains and everything.
So, Katie,
so if you listen to the audiobook, you can watch
a funny story.
In the mid-morning light, two enormous tyrannosaurs, each 20 feet high, loomed above him. Their reddish skin had a leathery appearance. Their huge heads were fierce-looking, with heavy jaws and large, sharp teeth. But somehow, here the animals conveyed no sense of menace to Thorne. They moved slowly, almost gently, bending repeatedly over a large circular rampart of dried mud, nearly 4 feet high. The two adults held bits of red flesh in their jaws as they ducked their heads below the mud wall. The movement was greeted by a frantic, high-pitched squeaking sound which stopped almost immediately. Then, when the adults lifted their heads again, the flesh was gone. There was no question. This was the nest. And Malcolm had been right. One tyrannosaur was noticeably larger than the other. In a few moments, the squeaking resumed. It sounded to Thorne like baby birds. The adults continued to duck their heads, feeding the unseen babies. A bit of torn flesh landed on the top of the mud mound. As he watched, Thorne saw an infant tyrannosaur rise into view above the rampart and start to scramble over the side. The infant was about the size of a turkey, with a large head and very large eyes. Its body was covered with a fluffy red down, which gave it a scraggly appearance. A ring of pale white down circled its neck. The infant squeaked repeatedly, and it crawled awkwardly toward the meat, using its weak forearms. But when it finally reached the carrion, it jabbed, biting the flesh decisively with tiny, sharp teeth. It was busily eating the food when it screeched in alarm and started to slide down the outer wall of dried mud. Immediately, the mother tyrannosaur dropped her head and intercepted the baby's fall, then gently nudged the animal back inside the nest. Thorne was impressed by the delicacy of her movements, the attentive way she cared for her young. The father, meanwhile, continued to tear small pieces of meat. Both animals kept up a continuous purring growl, as if to reassure the infants. As Thorne watched, he shifted his position. His foot stepped on a branch. There was a sharp crack. Immediately, both adults jerked their heads up. Thorne froze. He held his breath.
Yeah, because we need to let her know.
The Tyrannosaurs scanned the area around the nest, looking intently in every direction. Their bodies were tense, their heads alert. Their eyes flicked back and forth, accompanied by little head jerks. After a moment, they seemed to relax again. They bobbed their heads up and down and rubbed their snouts against each other. It seemed to be some kind of ritual movement, almost a dance. Only then did they resume feeding the infants. When they had calmed down, Thorne slipped away, moving quietly back to the motorcycle. Arby whispered over the headset, "Dr. Thorne, I can't see you." Thorne didn't answer. He tapped the microphone with his finger to signal that he had heard. Arby whispered, "I think I know what Dr. Levine is. He's off to your left." Thorne tapped the mic again and turned. To his left, among ferns, he saw a rusted bicycle. It said, "Property in Gen Corporation." It was leaning against the tree.
What the fuck? We talking about black days, yeah.
Not bad, Arby thought, sitting in the trailer and watching the remote videos as he clicked on them. He now had the monitor divided into quarters. It was a good compromise between lots of views and images large enough to see. One of the views looked down from above on the two tyrannosaurs in the secluded clearing. It was mid-morning. The sun shone brightly on the muddy, trampled grass of the clearing. In the center, he saw a round, steep-walled nest of mud. Inside the nest were 4 mottled white eggs, about the size of footballs. There were also some broken egg fragments and 2 baby tyrannosaurs looking exactly like featherless, squeaking birds. They sat in the nest with their heads turned up like baby birds, mouths gaping wide, waiting to be fed. Kelly watched the screen and said, "Look how cute they are." And then she added, "We should be out there." Arby didn't answer her. He was not at all sure he wanted to be any closer. The adults were being very cool about it, but Arby found the idea of these dinosaurs very unnerving in some deep way that he couldn't analyze. Arby had always found it reassuring to organize, to create order in his life. Even arranging the images neatly on the computer monitor was calming to him. But this island was a place where everything was unknown and unexpected, where you didn't know what would happen. He found that troubling.
I did not sleep a day.
On the other hand, Kelly was excited. She kept making comments about the tyrannosaurs, how big they were, the size of their teeth. She seemed entirely enthusiastic, without any fear at all. Arby felt annoyed with her.
No,
"Anyway," she said, "what makes you think you know where Dr. Levine is?" Arby pointed to the image of the nest on the monitor. "Watch. I see it." "No. Watch, Kel."
No, he's a very good.
As they stared at the screen, the image moved slightly. It panned to the left, then centered again. "See that?" Arby said. "So what? Maybe the wind is blowing the camera or something." Arby shook his head. "No, Kel, he's up in the tree. Levine's moving the camera." "Oh." A pause. She watched again. "You might be right." Arby grinned. That was about all he could expect to get from Kelly. "Yeah, I think so. But what's Dr. Levine doing in the tree? Maybe he's adjusting the camera."
Let's talk seriously. So
They listened to Thorne's breathing over the radio. Kelly stared at the 4 video images, each showing a different view of the island. She sighed. "I can't wait to get out there."
I know I can handle him. Can you handle me?
"Me too," Arby said, but he didn't mean it. He glanced out the window of the trailer and saw the explorer coming back with Eddie and Matt. Secretly, he was glad to see them return. Thorne stood at the base of the tree, looking up. He couldn't see Levine through the leaves, but he knew he must be somewhere up above, because he was making what seemed to Thorne a lot of noise. Thorne glanced nervously back at the clearing, screened by intervening foliage. He could still hear the purring. It remained steady, uninterrupted. Thorne waited. What the hell was Levine doing up in a tree anyway? He heard rustling in the branches above, and then silence. A grunt, then more rustling. And then Levine said aloud, "Oh shit," then a loud crashing sound, the crack of branches and a howl of pain, and then Levine crashed down on the ground in front of Thorne, landing hard on his back. He rolled over, clutching his shoulder. "Damn," he said. Levine wore muddy khakis that were torn in several places. Behind a 3-day growth of beard, his face was haggard and spattered with mud. He looked up as Thorne moved toward him and grinned. "You're the last person I expected to see, Doc," Levine said. "But your timing is flawless."
My man told me
Thorne
you had to
extended
call
his
me
hand,
Lucretia,
and Levine
okay?
started to reach for it when, from the
When
clearing
David
behind
know
them,
my name is
the Tyrannosaurs
Lucretia.
gave a deafening roar.
Okay?
Oh my God.
Oh,
Hurry
no,
the fuck
Kelly
up
said.
and get
On the
here.
monitor, the Tyrannosaurs were agitated, moving swiftly in
Oh my
circles,
God.
raising their heads and bellowing. Dr. Thorne, what's happening? Barbie said. They heard Levine's voice, tinny and scratchy on the radio, but they couldn't make out the words.
It's
Eddie
free!
and Malcolm
They've been
came into the
screaming
trailer.
my
Malcolm
name,
took one
Dave.
look at the monitor and said, "Tell them to
all
get
the
out of
girls
there
screaming
right
my name.
now." On the monitor, the two Tyrannosaurs had turned their backs to each other, so they were facing outward in a posture of defense.
Hell no.
The babies were protected in the center. The adults swung their heavy tails back and forth over the nest above the babies' heads, but the tension was palpable. And then one of the adults bellowed and charged out of the clearing. Dr. Thorne, Dr. Levine, get out of there!
He wants me to be everybody but Marie.
Thorne swung his
I'll be
leg over the
everybody
bike and
who
gripped
wants
the
me
rubber
to be.
handles. Levine jumped down behind, clutched him around the waist. Thorne heard a chilling roar and looked back to see one of the Tyrannosaurs crash through the foliage and charge them. The animal was running at full speed, head low, jaws open, in an unmistakable posture of attack.
Yeah.
Thorne twisted the throttle. The electric motor whirred. The back wheels spun in the mud, not moving. "Go!" Levine shouted. "Go!" The Tyrannosaur rushed toward them, roaring. Thorne could feel the ground shake. The roar was so loud it hurt his ears. The Tyrannosaur was nearly on them, the big head lunging forward, jaws wide open. Thorne kicked back with his heels, pushing the bike forward. Suddenly the rear wheel caught, throwing up a plume of mud, and the bike roared up the muddy track. He accelerated fast. The motorcycle fished and swerved treacherously on the trail. Behind him, Levine was shouting something, but Thorne didn't listen. His heart was pounding. The bike jumped across a rut in the path, and they almost lost their balance, then regained it, accelerating again. Thorne did not dare look back. He could smell the odor of rotten flesh, could hear the rasping breath of the giant animal in pursuit. "Doc, take it easy," Levine shouted. Thorne ignored him. The bike roared up the hill. The foliage slapped at them. Mud spit up on their faces and chests. He was pulled over into a rut, then brought the bike back to the center of the trail. He heard another roar and imagined it was a bit fainter, but "Doc," Levine shouted, leaning close to his ear. "What are you trying to do? Kill us? Doc, we're alone." Thorne came to a flat part of the path and risked a glance back over his shoulder. Levine was right. They were alone. He saw no sign of the pursuing Tyrannosaur, though he still heard it roaring somewhere in the distance. He slowed the bike. "Take it easy," Levine said, shaking his head. His face was ashen, frightened. "You're a terrible driver, do you know that? You ought to take some lessons. You almost got us killed there." "He was attacking us," Thorne said angrily. He was familiar with Levine's critical manner, but right now... "That's absurd," Levine said. "He wasn't attacking at all." "It sure as hell looked like it," Thorne said. No, Levine said. "He wasn't attacking us. The Rex was defending his nest. There's a big difference." "I didn't see any difference," Thorne said. He pulled the bike to a stop and glared at Levine. "In point of fact," Levine said, "if the Rex had decided to chase you, we'd be dead right now." But he stopped almost immediately. "He did?" Thorne said. "There's no question about it," Levine said in his pedantic manner. "The Rex only intended to scare us off and defend his territory. He'd never leave the nest unguarded unless we took something or disrupted the nest. I'm sure he's back there with his mate right now, hovering over the eggs, not going anywhere." "Then I guess we're lucky he's a good parent," Thorne said, gunning the motor. "Of course he's a good parent," Levine continued. "Any fool could tell that. Didn't you see how thin he was? He's been neglecting his own nourishment to feed his offspring. Probably been doing it for weeks. A Tyrannosaurus Rex is a complex animal with complex hunting behavior. And he has complex child-rearing behavior as well. I wouldn't be surprised if adult Tyrannosaurs have an extended parenting role that lasts for months. He may teach his offspring to hunt, for example. Start by bringing in small, wounded animals and letting the youngsters finish them off, that kind of thing. It'll be interesting to find out exactly what he does. Why are we waiting here?" Through Thorne's earpiece, the radio crackled. Malcolm said, "It would never occur to him to thank you for saving his life." Thorne grunted. "Evidently not," he said. Levine said, "Who are you talking to? Is it Malcolm? Is he here?" "Yes," Thorne said. "He's agreeing with me, isn't he?" Levine said. "Not exactly," Thorne said, shaking his head. "Look, Doc," Levine said, "I'm sorry if you got upset, but there was no reason for it. The truth is, we were never in danger, except from your bad driving." "Fine. That's fine." Thorne's heart was still pounding in his chest. He took a deep breath, swung the bike to the left, and headed down a wider path back toward their camp. Sitting behind him, Levine said, "I'm very glad to see you, Doc. I really am." Thorne didn't answer. He followed the path downward, through foliage. They descended to the valley, picking up speed. Soon they saw the trailers in the clearing below. Levine said, "Good, you brought everything. And the equipment's working? Everything in good condition?" "It all seems to be fine." "Perfect," Levine said. "Then this is just perfect." "Maybe not," Thorne said. Through the back window of the trailer, Kelly and Arby were waving cheerfully through the glass. "You're kidding," Levine said.
I know.
Fourth configuration.
If I don't have to
Approaching the chaotic edge, elements show internal conflict,
Hello?
an unstable and potentially lethal region. Ian Malcolm.
Give me an answer or something.
Levine. They came running across the clearing, shouting, Dr. Levine, you're safe." They hugged Levine, who smiled despite himself. He turned to Thorne. "Doc," Levine said, "this was very unwise." "Why don't you explain that to them?" Thorne said. "They're your students." Kelly said, "Don't be mad, Dr. Levine. It was our decision," Arby explained to Levine. "We came on our own." "On your own?" Levine said. "We thought you'd need help," Arby said, "and you did." He turned to Thorne. Thorne nodded. "Yes, they've helped us. And we promise we won't get in the way," Kelly said. "You go ahead and do whatever you have to do, and we will just—" "The kids were worried about you," Malcolm said, coming up to Levine, "because they thought you were in trouble." "Anyway, what's the big rush?" Eddie said. "I mean, you build all these vehicles and then you leave without them." "I had no choice," Levine said. "The government has an outbreak of some new encephalitis on its hands. They've decided it's related to the occasional dinosaur carcass that washes up there. Of course, the whole idea is idiotic, but that won't stop them from destroying every animal on this island the minute they find out about it. I had to get here first. Time is short." "So you came here alone," Malcolm said. "Nonsense, Ian. Stop pouting. I was going to call you as soon as I verified this was the island. And I didn't come here alone. I had a guide named Diego, a local man who swore he had been on this island as a kid years before. And he seemed entirely knowledgeable. He led me up the cliff without any problem. And everything was going just fine until we were attacked at the stream. And Diego—" "Attacked?" Malcolm said. "By what?" "I didn't really see what it was," Levine said. "It happened extremely fast. The animal knocked me down and tore the backpack, and I don't really know what happened after that. Possibly the shape of my pack confused it because I got up and started running again, and it didn't chase me." Malcolm was staring at him. "You were damn lucky, Richard." "Yes, well, I ran for a long time. When I looked back, I was alone in the jungle and lost. I didn't know what to do, so I climbed a tree. That seemed like a good idea. And then, around nightfall, the velociraptors showed up." "Velociraptors?" Arby said. "Small carnivores," Levine said. "Basic theropod body shape, long snout, binocular vision, roughly 2 meters tall, weighing perhaps 90 kilos. Very fast, intelligent, nasty little dinosaurs, and they travel in packs. And last night, there were 8 of them jumping all around my tree trying to get to me, all night long, jumping and snarling, jumping and snarling. I didn't get any sleep at all." "Ah, that's a shame," Eddie said. "Look," Levine said crossly, "it's not my problem if—" Thorne said, "You spent the night in the tree?" "Yes, and in the morning the raptors had gone, so I came down and started looking around. I found the lab, or whatever it is. Clearly they abandoned it in a hurry, leaving some animals behind. I went through the building and discovered that there is still power. Some systems are still going, all these years later. And most important, there is a network of security cameras. That's a very lucky break. So I decided to check on those cameras, and I was hard at work when you people barged in." "Wait a minute," Eddie said. "We came here to rescue you." "I don't know why," Levine said. "I certainly never asked you to." Thorne said, "It sounded like you did over the phone." "That is a misunderstanding," Levine said. "I was momentarily upset because I couldn't work the phone. You've made that phone too complicated, Doc. That's the problem. So, shall we get started?" Levine paused. He looked at the angry faces all around him. Malcolm turned to Thorne. "A great scientist," he said, "and a great human being." "Look," Levine said, "I don't know what your problem is. The expedition was going to come to this island sooner or later. In this instance, sooner is better. Everything has turned out quite well, and frankly, I don't see any reason to discuss it further. This is not the time for petty bickering. We have important things to do, and I think we should get started, because this island is an extraordinary opportunity, and it isn't going to last forever."
Is that oil?
Dodgson.
Or just sweat?
Louis Dodgson sat hunched in a dark corner of the Chespirito Cantina in Puerto Cortes, nursing a beer. Beside him, George Basilton, the Regis Professor of Biology at Stanford, was enthusiastically devouring a plate of huevos rancheros. The egg yolks ran yellow across green salsa. It made Dodgson sick just to look at it. He turned away, but he could still hear Basilton licking his lips noisily. There was no one else in the bar except for some chickens clucking around the floor. Every so often, a young boy would come to the door, throw a handful of rocks at the chickens, and run away again, giggling. A scratchy stereo played an old Elvis Presley tape through corroded speakers above the bar. Dodgson hummed "Falling in Love with You" and tried to control his temper. He had been sitting in this dump for damn near an hour. Basilton finished his eggs and pushed the plate away. He brought out the small notebook he carried everywhere with him. Now, Lou, he said, I've been thinking about how to handle this. Handle what? Dodson said irritably. There's nothing to handle unless we can get to that island. While he spoke, he tapped a small photograph of Richard Levine on the edge of the bar table, turned it over, looked at the image upside down, then right side up. He sighed. He looked at his watch. Lou, Basilton said patiently, getting to the island is not the important part. The important part is how we present our discovery to the world. Dodson paused. Our discovery, he repeated. I like that, George. That's very good. Our discovery. Well, that's the truth, isn't it? Basilton said with a bland smile. InGen is bankrupt, its technology lost to mankind. A tragic loss, as I have said many times on television, but under the circumstances, anyone who finds it again has made a discovery. I don't know what else you would call it. As Henri Poincaré put it, okay, Dodson said, so we make a discovery. And then what? Hold a press conference? Absolutely not, Basilton said, looking horrified. A press conference would appear extremely crass. It would open us up to all sorts of criticism. No. A discovery of this magnitude must be treated with decorum. It must be reported. Reported? In the literature. Nature, I imagine. Yes. Dodson squinted. You want to announce this in an academic publication? What better way to make it legitimate? Basilton said. It's entirely proper to present our findings to our scholarly peers. Of course it will start a debate, but what will that debate consist of? An academic squabble, professors sniping at professors, which will fill the science pages of the newspapers for 3 days until it is pushed aside by the latest news on breast implants. And in those 3 days, we will have staked our claim. You'll write it. Yes, Basilton said. And later, I think, an article in American Scholar or perhaps Natural History. A human interest piece, what this discovery means for the future, what it tells us about the past, all that. Dodson nodded. He could see that Basilton was correct, and he was reminded once again how much he needed him and how wise he had been to add him to the team. Dodson never thought about public reaction, and Basilton thought about nothing else. Well, that's fine, Dodson said, but none of it matters unless we get to that island. He glanced at his watch again. He heard a door open behind him, and Dodson's assistant, Howard King, came in, pulling a heavy-set Costa Rican man with a mustache. The man had a weathered face and a sullen expression. Dodson turned on his stool. Is this the guy? Yes, Lou. What's his name? Gandoka. Senor Gandoka. Dodson held up the photo of Levine. You know this man? Gandoka hardly glanced at the photo. He nodded. Si, Senor Levine. That's right. Senor fucking Levine. When was he here? A few days ago, he left with Dieguito, my cousin. They're not back yet. And where did they go? Dodson asked. Isla Sorna. Good. Dodson drained his beer, pushed the bottle away. You have a boat? He turned to King. Does he have a boat? King said, he's a fisherman. He has a boat. Gandoka nodded. A fishing boat, see. Good. I want to go to Isla Sorna, too. Si, senor, but today the weather... I don't care about the weather, Dodson said. The weather will get better. I want to go now. Perhaps later now. Gandoka spread his hands. I am very sorry, senor, Dodson said. Show him the money, Howard. King opened a briefcase. It was filled with 5,000 Cologne notes. Gandoka looked, picked up one of the bills, inspected it. He put it back carefully, shifted on his feet a little. Dodson said, I want to go now. Si, senor, Gandoka said. We'll leave when you are ready. That's more like it, Dodson said. How long to get to the island? Perhaps 2 hours, senor? Fine, Dodson said. That'll be fine.
That's the only thing you could think about. So you're in pain.
The high.
That's the logic there.
Here we go. There was a click as Levine connected the flexible cable to the Explorer's power winch and flicked it on. The cable turned slowly in the sunlight. They had all moved down onto the broad, grassy plain at the base of the cliff. The midday sun was high overhead, glaring off the rocky rim of the island. Below, the valley shimmered in midday heat. There was a herd of hypsilophodons a short distance away. The green, gazelle-like animals raised their heads occasionally above the grass to look toward them every time they heard the clink of metal as Eddie and the kids laid out the aluminum strut assembly, which had been the subject of so much speculation back in California. That assembly now looked like a jumble of thin struts, an oversized version of pickup sticks, lying in the grass of the plain. Now we will see, Levine said, rubbing his hands together. As the motor turned, the aluminum struts began to move and slowly lifted into the air. The emerging structure appeared spidery and delicate, but Thorne knew that the cross bracing would give it surprising strength. Strut unfolding, the structure rose 10 feet, then 15 feet, and finally it stopped. The little house at the top was now just beneath the lowest branches of the nearby trees, which almost concealed it from view. But the scaffolding itself gleamed bright and shiny in the sun. "Is that it?" Arby said. "That's it, yes." Thorne walked around the 4 sides, slipping in the locking pins to hold it upright. "But it's much too shiny," Levine said. "We should have made it matte black." Thorne said, "Eddie, we need to hide this." "Want to spray it, Doc? I think I brought some black paint." Levine shook his head. "No, then it'll smell. How about those palms?" "Sure, we can do that." Eddie walked to a stand of nearby palms and began to hack away big fronds with his machete. Kelly stared up at the aluminum strut assembly. "It's great," she said. "But what is it?" "It's a high hide," Levine said. "Come on." And he began to climb the scaffolding. The structure at the top was a little house, its roof supported by aluminum bars spaced 4 feet apart. The floor of the house was also made of aluminum bars, but these were closer together, about 6 inches apart. Their feet threatened to slip through, so Levine took the first of the bundles of fronds that Eddie Carr was raising on a rope and used them to make a more complete floor. The remaining fronds he tied to the outside of the house, concealing its structure. Arby and Kelly stared out at the animals. From their vantage point, they could look across the whole valley. There was a distant herd of apatosaurs on the other side of the river. A cluster of triceratops browsed to the north. Near the water, some duck-billed dinosaurs with long crests rising above their heads moved forward to drink. A low trumpeting cry from the duck-bills floated across the valley toward them, a deep, unearthly sound. A moment later, there was an answering cry from the forest at the opposite side of the valley. "What was that?" Kelly said. "Parasaurolophus," Levine said. "It's trumpeting through its nuchal crest. Low-frequency sound carries a long distance." To the south, there was a herd of dark green animals with large, curved, protruding foreheads and a rim of small, knobby horns. They looked a little like buffalo. "What do you call those?" Kelly said. "Good question," Levine said. "They are most likely Pachycephalosaurus wyomingensis. But it's difficult to say for sure because a full skeleton for these animals has never been recovered. Their foreheads are very thick bones, so we've found many domed cranial fragments, but this is the first time I've ever seen the whole animal." "And those heads, what are they for?" Arby said. "Nobody knows," Levine said. "Everyone has assumed they're used for butting, for intraspecies fighting among males, competition for females, that sort of thing." Malcolm climbed up into the hide. "Yes, butting heads," he said sourly, "just as you see them now." "All right," Levine said. "So they're not butting heads at the moment. Perhaps their breeding season is concluded." "Or perhaps they don't do it at all," Malcolm said, staring at the green animals. "They look pretty peaceful to me." "Yes," Levine said, "but of course that doesn't mean a thing. African buffalo appear peaceful most of the time, too. In fact, they usually just stand motionless. Yet they're unpredictable and dangerous animals. We have to presume those domes exist for a reason, even if we're not seeing it now." Levine turned to the kids. "That's why we made this structure. We want to make round-the-clock observations on the animals," he said. "To the extent possible, we want a full record of their activities." "Why?" Arby said. "Because," Malcolm said, "this island presents a unique opportunity to study the greatest mystery in the history of our planet, extinction." "You see," Malcolm said, "when InGen shut down their facility, they did it hastily, and they left some live animals behind. That was 5 or 6 years ago. Dinosaurs mature rapidly. Most species attain adulthood in 4 or 5 years. By now, the first generation of InGen dinosaurs bred in a laboratory has attained maturity and has begun to breed a new generation entirely in the wild. There is now a complete ecological system on this island with a dozen or so dinosaur species living in social groups for the first time in 65 million years." Arby said, "So why is that an opportunity?" Malcolm pointed across the plain. "Well, think about it. Extinction is a very difficult research topic. There are dozens of competing theories. The fossil record is incomplete, and you can't perform experiments. Galileo could climb the Tower of Pisa and drop balls to test his theory of gravity. He never actually did it, but he could have. Newton used prisms to test his theory of light. Astronomers observed eclipses to test Einstein's theory of relativity. Testing occurs throughout science, but how can you test a theory of extinction? You can't." Arby said, "But here..." "Yes," Malcolm said. "What we have here is a population of extinct animals artificially introduced into a closed environment and allowed to evolve all over again." There's never been anything like it in all history. We already know these animals became extinct once, but nobody knows why. And you expect to find out in a few days? Yes, Malcolm said, we do. How? You don't expect them to become extinct again, do you? You mean right before our eyes? Malcolm laughed. No, nothing like that. But the point is, for the first time, we aren't just studying bones. We're seeing live animals and observing their behavior. I have a theory, and I think that even in a short time we will see evidence for that theory. What evidence? Kelly said. What theory? Arby said. Malcolm smiled at them. Wait, he said. The Red Queen. The apatosaurs had come down to the river in the heat of the day. Their graceful, curving necks were reflected in the water as they bent to drink. Their long whip-like tails swung back and forth lazily. Several younger apatosaurs, much smaller than the adults, scampered about in the center of the herd. Beautiful, isn't it? Levine said. The way it all fits together, just beautiful. He leaned over the side and shouted to Thorne, Where's my mount? Coming up, Thorne said. The rope now brought up a heavy, wide-based tripod and a circular mount on top. There were 5 video cameras atop the mount and dangling wires leading to solar panels. Levine and Malcolm began to set it up. What happens to the video? Arby said. The data gets multiplexed and we uplink it back to California by satellite. We'll also hook into the security network, so we'll have lots of observation points. And we don't have to be here? Right. And this is what you call a high hide? Yes, at least that's what scientists like Sarah Harding call it. Thorne climbed up to join them. The little shelter was now quite crowded, but Levine didn't seem to notice. He was entirely focused on the dinosaurs. He turned a pair of binoculars on the animals spread across the plain. Just as we thought, he said to Malcolm. Spatial organization. Infants and juveniles in the center of the herd, protective adults on the periphery. The apatosaurs use their tails as defense. That's the way it looks. Oh, there's no question about it, Levine said. He sighed. It's so agreeable to be proven right. On the ground below, Eddie unpacked the circular aluminum cage, the same one they had seen in California. It was 6 feet tall and 4 feet in diameter, constructed of 1-inch titanium bars. What do you want me to do with this? Eddie said. Leave it down there, Levine said. That's where it belongs. Eddie set the cage upright in the corner of the scaffolding. Levine climbed down. And what's that for? Arby said, looking down. Catching a dinosaur? In point of fact, just the opposite. Levine clipped the cage to the side of the scaffolding. He swung the door open and shut, testing it. There was a lock in the door. He checked the lock, too, leaving the key in place with its dangling elastic loop. It's a predator cage, like a shark cage, Levine said. If you're down here walking around and anything happens, you can climb in here and you'll be safe. In case what happens? Arby said with a worried look. Actually, I don't think anything will happen, Levine said, climbing back up, because I doubt the animals will pay any attention to us or to this little house once the structure's been concealed. You mean they won't see it? Oh, they'll see it, Levine said, but they'll ignore it. But if they smell us, Levine shook his head. We sighted the hide, so the prevailing wind is toward us, and you may have noticed these ferns have a distinct smell. It was a mild, slightly tangy odor, almost like eucalyptus. Arby fretted. But suppose they decide to eat the ferns? They won't, Levine said. These are Dichronopterus cyathioides. They're mildly toxic and cause a rash in the mouth. In point of fact, there's a theory that their toxicity first evolved back in the Jurassic as a defense against dinosaur browsers. That's not a theory, Malcolm said. It's just idle speculation. There's some logic behind it, Levine said. Plant life in the Mesozoic must have been severely challenged by the arrival of very large dinosaurs. Herds of giant herbivores, each animal consuming hundreds of pounds of plant matter each day, would have wiped out any plants that didn't evolve some defense, a bad taste, or nettles, or thorns, or chemical toxicity. So perhaps Cyathioides evolved its toxicity back then. And it's very effective, because contemporary animals don't eat these ferns anywhere on Earth. That's why they're so abundant. You may have noticed. Plants have defenses? Kelly said. Of course they do. Plants evolve like every other form of life, and they've come up with their own forms of aggression, defense, and so on. In the 19th century, most theories concerned animals. Nature red in tooth and claw, all that. But now, scientists are thinking about nature green in root and stem. We realize that plants, in their ceaseless struggle to survive, have evolved everything from complex symbiosis with other animals to signaling mechanisms to warn other plants, to outright chemical warfare. Kelly frowned. Signaling? Like what? Oh, there are many examples, Levine said. In Africa, acacia trees evolved very long, sharp thorns, 3 inches or so, but that only provoked animals like giraffes and antelope to evolve long tongues to get past the thorns. Thorns alone didn't work. So, in the evolutionary arms race, the acacia trees next evolved toxicity.
No, it's not that.
They started to produce large quantities of tannin in their leaves, which sets off a lethal metabolic reaction in the animals that eat them. Literally kills them.
But you can't help
At the
it.
same
I know.
time, the acacias also evolved a kind of chemical warning system among themselves. If an antelope begins to eat one tree in a grove, that tree releases the chemical ethylene into the air, which causes other trees in the grove to step up the production of leaf tannin. Within 5 or 10 minutes, the other trees are producing more tannin, making themselves poisonous. And then what happens to the antelope? It dies? Well, not anymore, Levine said, because the evolutionary arms race continued. Eventually, antelopes learned that they could only browse for a short time. Once the trees started to produce more tannin, they had to stop eating it. And the browsers developed new strategies. For example, when a giraffe eats an acacia tree, it then avoids all the trees downwind. Instead, it moves on to another tree that is some distance away, so the animals have adapted to this defense too. In evolutionary theory, this is called the Red Queen phenomenon, Malcolm said, because in Alice in Wonderland, the Red Queen tells Alice she has to run as fast as she can just to stay where she is. That's the way evolutionary spirals seem. All the organisms are evolving at a furious pace just to stay in the same balance, to stay where they are. Arby said. And this is common? Even with plants? Oh, yes, Levine said. In their own way, plants are extremely active. Oak trees, for example, produce tannin and phenol as a defense when caterpillars attack them. A whole grove of trees is alerted as soon as one tree is infested. It's a way to protect the entire grove, a kind of cooperation among trees, you might say. Arby nodded and looked out from the high hide at the apatosaurs still by the river below. So, Arby said, is that why the dinosaurs haven't eaten all the trees off this island? Because those big apatosaurs must eat a lot of plants. They have long necks to eat the high leaves, but the trees hardly look touched. Very good, Levine said, nodding. I noticed that myself. Is that because of these plant defenses? Well, it might be, Levine said, but I think there's a very simple explanation for why the trees are preserved. What's that? Just look, Levine said. It's right before your eyes. Arby picked up the binoculars and stared at the herds. What's the simple explanation? Among paleontologists, Levine said, there's been an interminable debate about why sauropods have long necks. Those animals you see have necks 20 feet long. The traditional belief has been that sauropods evolved long necks to eat high foliage that could not be reached by smaller animals. So, Arby said, what's the debate? Most animals on this planet have short necks, Levine said, because a long neck is, well, a pain in the neck. It causes all sorts of problems. Structural problems, how to arrange muscles and ligaments to support a long neck. Behavioral problems, nerve impulses must travel a long way from the brain to the body. Swallowing problems, food has to go a long way from the mouth to the stomach. Breathing problems, air has to be pulled down a long windpipe. Cardiac problems, blood has to be pumped way up to the head or the animal faints. In evolutionary terms, all this is very difficult to do. But giraffes do it, Arby said. Yes, they do. Although giraffe necks are nowhere near this long, giraffes have evolved large hearts and very thick fascia around the neck. In effect, the neck of a giraffe is like a blood pressure cuff going all the way up. Do dinosaurs have the same cuff? We don't know. We assume apatosaurs have huge hearts, perhaps 300 pounds or more. But there is another possible solution to the problem of pumping blood in a long neck. Yes? You're looking at it right now, Levine said. Arby clapped his hands. They don't raise their necks. Correct, Levine said. At least not very often or for long periods. Of course, right now the animals are drinking, so their necks are down, but my guess is that if we watch them for an extended period, we'll find they don't spend much time with their necks raised high. And that's why they don't eat the leaves on the trees. Right. Kelly frowned. But if their long necks aren't used for eating, then why did they evolve them in the first place? Levine smiled. There must be a good reason, he said. I believe it has to do with defense. Defense? Long necks? Arby stared. I don't get it. Keep looking, Levine said. It's really rather obvious. Arby peered through binoculars. He said to Kelly, I hate it when he tells us it's obvious. I know, she said with a sigh. Arby glanced over at Thorn and caught his eye. Thorn made a V with his fingers and then pushed one finger, tilting it over. The movement forced the second finger to shift too, so the two fingers were connected. If it was a clue, he didn't get it. He didn't get it. He frowned. Thorn mouthed, bridge. Arby looked and watched the whip-like tails swing back and forth over the younger animals. I get it, Arby said. They use their tails for defense, and they need long necks to counterbalance the long tails. It's like a suspension bridge. Levine squinted at Arby. You did that very fast, he said. Thorn turned away, hiding a smile. But I'm right, Arby said. Yes, Levine said. Your view is essentially correct. Long necks exist because the long tails exist. It's a different situation in theropods, which stand on two legs. But in quadrupeds, there needs to be a counterbalance for the long tail, or the animal would simply tip over. Malcolm said, Actually, there is something much more puzzling about this apatosaur herd. Oh, Levine said. What's that? There are no true adults, Malcolm said. Those animals we see are very large by our standards, but in fact, none of them has attained full adult size. I find that perplexing. Do you? It doesn't trouble me in the least, Levine said. Unquestionably, it is simply because they haven't had enough time to reach maturity. I'm sure apatosaurs grow more slowly than the other dinosaurs. After all, large mammals like elephants grow more slowly than small ones. Malcolm shook his head. That's not the explanation, he said. Oh, then what? Keep looking, Malcolm said, pointing out over the plain. It's really rather obvious. The kids giggled. Levine gave a little shiver of displeasure. What is obvious to me, he said, is that none of the species appear to have attained full adulthood. The Triceratops, the apatosaurs, even the parasaurs are a bit smaller than one would expect. This argues for a consistent factor, some element of diet, the effects of confinement on a small island, perhaps even the way they were engineered, but I don't consider it particularly remarkable or worrisome. Maybe you're right, Malcolm said. And then again, maybe you're not. Puerto Cortés. No flights, Sarah Harding said. What do you mean there are no flights? It was 11 o'clock in the morning. Harding had been flying for the last 15 hours, much of it spent on a U.S. military transport that she'd caught from Nairobi to Dallas. She was exhausted. Her skin felt grimy. She needed a shower and a change of clothes. Instead, she found herself arguing with this very stubborn official in a ratty little town on the west coast of Costa Rica. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the sky was still gray, with low-hanging clouds over the deserted airfield. I am sorry, Rodriguez said. No flights can be arranged. But what about the helicopter that took the men earlier? There is a helicopter, yes. Where is it? The helicopter is not here. I can see that, but where is it? Rodriguez spread his hands. It has gone to San Cristobal. When will it be back? I do not know. I think tomorrow, or perhaps the day after. Senor Rodriguez, she said firmly, I must get to that island today. I understand your wish, Rodriguez said, but I cannot do anything to help this. What do you suggest? Rodriguez shrugged. I could not make a suggestion. Is there a boat that will take me? I do not know of a boat. This is a harbor, Harding said. She pointed out the window. I see all sorts of boats out there. I know, but I do not believe one will go to the islands. The weather is not so favorable. But if I were to go down to... Yes, of course, Rodriguez sighed. Of course you may ask. Which was how she found herself, shortly after 11 o'clock on a rainy morning, walking down the rickety wooden dock with her backpack on her shoulder. 4 boats were tied up to the dock, which smelled strongly of fish. But all the boats seemed to be deserted. All the activity was at the far end of the dock, where a much larger boat was tied up. Beside the boat, a red Jeep Wrangler was being strapped for loading, along with several large steel drums and wooden crates of supplies. She admired the car in passing. It had been specifically modified, enlarged to the size of the Land Rover Defender, the most desirable of all field vehicles. Changing this Jeep must have been an expensive alteration, she thought. Only for researchers with lots of money. Standing on the dock, a pair of Americans in wide-brimmed sun hats were shouting and pointing as the Jeep lifted lopsidedly into the air and was swung onto the deck of the boat with an ancient crane. She heard one of the men shout, "Careful! Careful!" as the Jeep thudded down hard on the wooden deck. "Damn it, be careful!" Several workmen began to carry the boxes onto the ship. The crane swung back to pick up the steel drums. Harding went over to the nearest man and said politely, "Excuse me, but I wonder if you could help me." The man glanced at her. He was medium height, with reddish skin and bland features. He looked awkward in new khaki safari clothes. His manner was preoccupied and tense. "I'm busy now," he said, and turned away. "Manuel, watch it, that's sensitive equipment." "I'm sorry to bother you," she continued, "but my name is Sarah Harding, and I'm trying—" "I don't care if you're Sarah Bernhardt. Manuel, damn it!" The man waved his arms. "You there, yes, you, hold that box upright." "I'm trying to get to Isla Sorna," she said, finishing. At this, the man's entire demeanor changed. He turned back to her slowly. "Isla Sorna?" he said. "You're not associated with Dr. Levine by any chance, are you?" "Yes, I am." "Well, I'll be damned." he said, suddenly breaking into a warm smile. "What do you know?" He extended his hand. "I'm Lou Dodson, from the Biosyn Corporation back in Cupertino. This is my associate, Howard King." "Aye," the other man said, nodding. Howard King was younger and taller than Dodson, and he was handsome in a clean-cut California way. Sarah recognized his type, a classic beta male animal, subservient to the core. And there was something odd about his behavior toward her. He moved a little away and seemed as uncomfortable around her as Dodson now seemed friendly. "And up there," Dodson continued, pointing onto the deck, "is our third, George Basilton." Harding saw a heavy-set man on the deck, bent over the boxes as they came on board. His shirt sleeves were soaked in sweat. She said, "Are you all friends of Richard?" "We're on our way over to see him right now," Dodson said, "to help him out." He hesitated, frowning at her. "But, he didn't tell us about you—" She was suddenly aware then of how she must appear to him, a short woman in her 30s, wearing a rumpled shirt, khaki shorts, and heavy boots. Her clothes dirty, her hair unkempt after all the flights. She said, "I know Richard through Ian Malcolm. Ian and I are old friends." "I see." He continued to stare at her as if he was unsure of her in some way. She felt compelled to explain. "I've been in Africa. I decided to come here at the last minute," she said. "Doc Thorne called me." "Oh, of course, Doc." The man nodded and seemed to relax as if everything now made sense to him. She said, "Is Richard all right?" "Well, I certainly hope so, because we're taking all this equipment to him." "You're going to Sorna now?" "We are, if this weather holds," Dodson said, glancing at the sky. "We should be ready to go in 5 or 10 minutes. You know, you're welcome to join us if you need a ride," he said cheerfully. "We could use the company. Where's your stuff?" "I've only got this," she said, lifting her small backpack. "Traveling light, eh? Well, good, Miss Harding. Welcome to the party." He seemed entirely open and friendly now. It was such a marked change from his earlier behavior, but she noticed that the handsome man, King, remained distinctly uneasy. King turned his back to her and acted very busy, shouting at the workmen to be careful with the last of the wooden crates, which were marked Biosyn Corporation in stenciled lettering. She had the impression he was avoiding looking at her. And she still hadn't gotten a good look at the third man on deck. It made her hesitate. "You're sure it's all right?" "Of course it's all right. We'd be delighted," Dodson said. "Besides, how else are you going to get there? There's no planes. The helicopter is gone." "I know, I checked." "Well, then you know. If you want to get to the island, you'd better go with us." She looked at the jeep on the boat and said, "I think Doc must already be there with his equipment." At the mention of that, the second man, King, snapped his head around in alarm. But Dodson just nodded calmly and said, "Yes, I think so. He left last night, I believe." "That's what he said to me." "Right," Dodson nodded. "So he's already there. At least I hope he is." From on deck there were shouts in Spanish, and a captain in greasy overalls came and looked over the side. "Senor Dodson, we are ready." "Good," Dodson said. "Excellent. Climb aboard, Miss Harding. Let's get going." King. Spewing black smoke, the fishing boat chugged out of the harbor, heading toward open sea. Howard King felt the rumble of the ship's engines beneath his feet, heard the creak of the wood. He listened to the shouts of the crewmen in Spanish. King looked back at the little town of Puerto Cortes, a jumble of little houses clustered around the water's edge. He hoped this damn boat was seaworthy, because they were out in the middle of nowhere. And Dodson was cutting corners, taking chances, again. It was the situation King feared most. Howard King had known Louis Dodson for almost 10 years, ever since he had joined Biosyn as a young Berkeley Ph.D., a promising researcher with the energy to conquer the world. King had done his doctoral thesis on blood coagulation factors. He had joined Biosyn at a time of intense interest in those factors, which seemed to hold the key to dissolving clots in patients with heart attacks. There was a race among biotech companies to develop a new drug that would save lives and make a fortune as well. Initially, King worked on a promising substance called hemagglutinin V5, or HGV5. In early tests, it dissolved platelet aggregation to an astonishing degree. King became the most promising young researcher at Biosyn. His picture was prominently featured in the annual report. He had his own lab and an operating budget of nearly $500,000. And then, without warning, the bottom fell out. In preliminary tests on human subjects, HGV5 failed to dissolve clots in either myocardial infarctions or pulmonary embolisms. Worse, it produced severe side effects: gastrointestinal bleeding, skin rashes, neurological problems. After one patient died from convulsions, the company halted further testing. Within weeks, King lost his lab. A newly arrived Danish researcher took it over. He was developing an extract from the saliva of the Sumatran yellow leech, which showed more promise. King moved to a smaller lab, decided he was tired of blood factors, and turned his attention to painkillers. He had an interesting compound, the L-isomer of a protein from the African horny toad, which seemed to have narcotic effects, but he had lost his former confidence. And when the company reviewed his work, they concluded that his research was insufficiently documented to warrant seeking FDA approvals for testing. His horny toad project was summarily cancelled. King was then 35 and twice a failure. His picture no longer graced the annual report. It was rumored that the company would probably let him go at the next review period. When he proposed a new research project, it was rejected at once. It was a dark time in his life. Then, Louis Dodgson suggested they have lunch. Dodgson had an unsavory reputation among the researchers. He was known as the Undertaker because of the way he took over the work of others and prettied it up as his own. In earlier years, King never would have been seen with him, but now he allowed Dodgson to take him to an expensive seafood restaurant in San Francisco. "Research is hard," Dodgson said sympathetically. "You can say that again," King said. "Hard and risky," Dodgson said. "The fact is, innovative research rarely pans out, but does management understand? No. If the research fails, you're the one who's blamed. It's not fair." "Tell me," King said. "But that's the name of the game." Dodgson shrugged and speared a leg of soft-shell crab. King said nothing. "Personally, I don't like risk," Dodgson continued, "and original work is risky. Most new ideas are bad, and most original work fails. That's the reality. If you feel compelled to do original research, you can expect to fail. That's all right if you work in a university where failure is praised and success leads to ostracism. But in industry, no, original work in industry is not a wise career choice. It's only going to get you into trouble, which is where you are right now, my friend." "What can I do?" King said. "Well," Dodgson said, "I have my own version of the scientific method. I call it focused research development. If only a few ideas are going to be good, why try to find them yourself? It's too hard. Let other people find them. Let them take the risk. Let them go for the so-called glory. I'd rather wait and develop ideas that already show promise. Take what's good and make it better. Or at least make it different enough so that I can patent it, and then I own it. Then it's mine." King was amazed at the straightforward way that Dodgson admitted he was a thief. He didn't seem in the least embarrassed. King poked at his salad for a while. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I see something in you," Dodgson said. "I see ambition, frustrated ambition. And I'm telling you, Howard, you don't have to be frustrated. You don't even have to be fired from the company at the next performance review, which is exactly what's going to happen. How old is your kid?" "4, King said. "Terrible to be out of work with a young family. And it won't be easy to get another job. Who's going to give you a chance now? By 35, a research scientist has already made his mark, or he's not likely to. I don't say that's right, but that's how they think." King knew that's how they thought, at every biotechnology company in California. "But Howard," Dodgson said, leaning across the table, lowering his voice, "a wonderful world awaits you if you choose to look at things differently. There's a whole other way to live your life. I really think you should consider what I'm saying." 2 weeks later, King became Dodgson's personal assistant in the Department of Future Biogenic Trends, which was how Biosyn referred to its efforts at industrial espionage. And in the years that followed, King had once again risen swiftly at Biosyn, this time because Dodgson liked him. Now King had all the accoutrements of success: a Porsche, a mortgage, a divorce, a kid he saw on weekends. All because King had proven to be the perfect second in command, working long hours, handling the details, keeping his fast-talking boss out of trouble. And in the process, King had come to know all the sides of Dodgson: his charismatic side, his visionary side, and his dark, ruthless side. King told himself that he could handle the ruthless side, that he could keep it in check, that over the years he had learned how to do that. But sometimes he was not so sure, like now. Because here they were, in some rickety, stinking fishing boat, heading out into the ocean off some desolate village in Costa Rica, and in this tense moment, Dodgson has suddenly decided to play some kind of game, meeting this woman and deciding to take her along. King didn't know what Dodgson intended, but he could see the intense gleam in Dodgson's eyes that he had seen only a few times before, and it was a look that always alarmed him. The woman, Harding, was now up on the foredeck, standing near the bow. She was looking off at the ocean. King saw Dodson walking around the jeep and beckoned to him nervously. "Listen," King said, "we have to talk." "Sure," Dodson said easily. "What's on your mind?" And he smiled. That charming smile. Harding. Sarah Harding stared at the gray, menacing sky. The boat rolled in the heavy offshore swell. The deckhands scrambled to tie down the jeep, which threatened repeatedly to break free. She stood in the bow, fighting seasickness. On the far horizon, dead ahead, she could just see the low black line that was their first glimpse of Isla Sorna. She turned and looked back, and saw Dodson and King were huddled by the railing amidships in intense conversation. King seemed to be upset, gesticulating rapidly. Dodson was listening and shaking his head. After a moment, he put his arm on King's shoulder. He seemed to be trying to calm the younger man down. Both men ignored the activity around the jeep, which was odd, she thought, considering how worried they had been earlier about the equipment. Now they didn't seem to care. As for the third man, Basilton, she had of course recognized him, and she was surprised to find him here on this little fishing boat. Basilton had shaken her hand in a perfunctory way, and he had disappeared below decks as soon as the ship pulled away from the dock. He had not reappeared. But perhaps he was seasick too. As she continued to watch, she saw Dodson break away from King and hurry over to supervise the deckhands. Left alone, King went to check on the straps that lashed the boxes and barrels to the deck farther aft. The boxes marked Biosyn. Harding had never heard of the Biosyn Corporation. She wondered what connection Ian and Richard had with it. Whenever Ian was around her, he had always been critical, even contemptuous of biotechnology companies. And these men seemed to be unlikely friends. They were too rigid, too geeky. But then, she reflected, Ian did have strange friends. They were always showing up unexpectedly at his apartment. The Japanese calligrapher, the Indonesian gamelan troupe, the Las Vegas juggler in a shiny bolero jacket, that weird French astrologer who thought the earth was hollow. And then there were his mathematician friends. They were really crazy. Or so they seemed to Sarah. They were so wild-eyed, so wrapped up in their proofs, pages and pages of proofs, sometimes hundreds of pages. It was all too abstract for her. Sarah Harding liked to touch the dirt, to see the animals, to experience the sounds and the smells. That was real to her. Everything else was just a bunch of theories, possibly right, possibly wrong. Waves began to crash over the bow, and she moved a little astern to keep dry. She yawned. She hadn't slept much in the last 24 hours. Dodson finished working on the jeep and came over to her. She said, "Everything all right?" "Oh, yes," Dodson said, smiling cheerfully. "Your friend King seemed upset." "He doesn't like boats," Dodson said. He nodded to the waves. "But we're making better time. It'll only be an hour or so until we land." "Tell me," she said, "what is the Biosyn Corporation? I've never heard of it." "It's a small company," Dodson said. "We make what are called consumer biologicals. We specialize in recreational and sports organisms. For example, we engineered new kinds of trout and other game fish. We're making new kinds of dogs, smaller pets for apartment dwellers, that sort of thing." Exactly the sort of thing that Ian hated, she thought. "How do you know Ian?" "Oh, we go way back," Dodson said. She noticed his vagueness. "How far?" "Back to the days of the park." "The park," she said. He nodded. "Did he ever tell you how he hurt his leg?" "No," she said. "He would never talk about it. He just said it happened on a consulting job that had, I don't know, some sort of trouble. Was it a park?" "Yes, in a way," Dodson said, staring out at the ocean. After a moment, he shrugged. "And what about you? How do you know him?" "He was one of my thesis readers. I'm an ethologist. I study large mammals in African grassland ecosystems. East Africa, carnivores in particular." "Carnivores? I've been studying hyenas," she said. "Before that, lions." "For a long time?" "Almost 10 years now. 6 years continuously since my doctorate." "Interesting," Dodson said, nodding. "And so did you come here all the way from Africa?" "Yes, from Seronera." "In Tanzania?" Dodson nodded vaguely. He looked past her shoulder toward the island. "What do you know? Looks like the weather may clear after all." She turned and saw streaks of blue in the thinning clouds overhead. The sun was trying to break through. The sea was calmer, and she was surprised to see the island was much closer. She could clearly see the cliffs rising above the seas. The cliffs were reddish-gray volcanic rock, very sheer. "In Tanzania," Dodson said. "You run a large research team?" "No, I work alone." No students? He said. I'm afraid not. It's because my work just isn't very glamorous. The big savanna carnivores in Africa are primarily nocturnal, so my research is mostly conducted at night. Must be hard on your husband. Oh, I'm not married, she said with a little shrug. I'm surprised, he said. After all, a beautiful woman like you? I never had time, she said quickly. To change the subject, she said, where do you land on this island? Dodson turned to look. They were now close enough to the island to see the waves crashing, high and white, against the base of the cliffs. They were only a mile or two away. It's an unusual island, Dodson said. This whole region of Central America is volcanic. There are something like 30 active volcanoes between Mexico and Colombia. All these offshore islands were at one time active volcanoes, part of the central chain. But unlike the mainland, the islands are now dormant, haven't erupted for 1,000 years or so. So, we're seeing the outside of the crater? Exactly. The cliffs are all the result of erosion from rainfall, but the ocean erodes the base of the cliffs too. Those flat sections on the cliff you see are where the ocean cut in at the bottom, and huge areas of the cliff face were undermined and just cleaved, falling straight down into the sea. It's all soft volcanic rock. And so you land. There are several places on the windward side where the ocean has cut caves into the cliff. And at two of those places the caves meet rivers flowing out from the interior, so they're passable. He pointed ahead.
What?
You see there, you can just now see one of the caves. Sarah Harding saw a dark, irregular opening cut into the base of the cliff. All around it, the waves crashed, plumes of white water rising 50 feet up into the air. You're going to take this boat into that cave there? If the weather holds, yes. Dodson turned away. Don't worry, it's not as bad as it looks. Anyway, you were saying about Africa. When did you leave Africa? Right after Doc Thorne called. He said he was going with Ian to rescue Richard and asked if I wanted to come. And what did you say? I said I'd think about it. Dodson frowned. You didn't tell him you were coming? No, because I wasn't sure I wanted to. I mean, I'm busy. I have my work, and it's a long way. For an old lover, Dodson said, nodding sympathetically. She sighed. Well, you know, Ian. Yes, I know Ian, Dodson said. Quite a character. That's one way to put it, she said. There was an awkward silence. Dodson cleared his throat. I'm confused, he said. Who exactly did you tell you were coming here? Nobody, she said. I just jumped on the next plane and came. But what about your university, your colleagues? She shrugged. There wasn't time, and as I said, I work alone. She looked again at the island. The cliffs rose high above the boat. They were only a few hundred yards away. The cave appeared much larger now, but the waves crashed high on either side. She shook her head. It looks pretty rough. Don't worry, Dodson said. See, the captain's already making for it. We'll be perfectly safe once we're passing through, and then it should be very exciting. The boat rolled and dipped in the sea, an uncertain motion. She gripped the railing. Beside her, Dodson grinned. See what I mean? Exciting, isn't it? He seemed suddenly energized, almost agitated. His body became tense. He rubbed his hands together. No need to worry, Miss Harding. I can't allow anything to happen to... She didn't know what he was talking about, but before she could reply, the nose of the boat dipped again, kicking up spray, and she stumbled a little. Dodson bent over quickly, apparently to steady her, but it seemed as if something went wrong. His body struck against her legs, then lifted, and then another wave crashed over them, and she felt her body twist, and she screamed and clutched at the railing, but it was all happening too fast. The world upended and swirled around her. Her head clanged once on the railing, and then she was tumbling, falling through space. She saw the peeling paint on the hull of the boat sliding past her. She saw the green ocean rush up toward her, and then she was shocked with the sudden stinging cold as she plunged into the rough, heaving sea and sank beneath the waves into darkness. The valley. This is going extremely well, Levine said, rubbing his hands together. Far beyond my expectations, I must say. I couldn't be more pleased. He was standing in the high hide with Thorne, Eddie, Malcolm, and the kids, looking down on the valley floor below. Everyone was sweating inside the little observation hut. The midday air was still and hot. Around them, the grassy meadow was deserted. Most of the dinosaurs had moved beneath the trees into the cool of the shade. The exception was the herd of apatosaurs, which had left the trees to return to the river, where they were now drinking once again. The huge animals clustered fairly tightly around the water's edge. In the same vicinity, but more spread out, were the high-crested parasaurolophosors. These somewhat smaller dinosaurs positioned themselves near the apatosaur herd. Thorne wiped sweat out of his eyes and said,
Well, how-
"Why exactly are you
Does it
pleased?"
work for her too?
"Because of what we're seeing here," Malcolm said. He glanced at his watch and wrote an entry in his notebook. "We're getting the data that I hoped for. It's very exciting." Thorne yawned, sleepy in the heat. "Why is it exciting? The dinosaurs are drinking. What's the big deal?" "Drinking again," Levine corrected him, "for the second time in an hour. At midday, such fluid intake is highly suggestive of the thermoregulatory strategies these large creatures employ." "You mean they drink a lot to stay cool?" Thorne said, always impatient with jargon. "Yes, clearly they do drink a lot, but in my view, their return to the river may have another significance entirely." "Which is?" Come, Levine said, pointing. "Look at the herds. Look how they're arranged spatially. We are seeing something that no one has witnessed before or even suspected for dinosaurs. We're seeing nothing less than interspecies symbiosis." "We are?" "Yes," Levine said. "The apatosaurs and the parasaurs are together. I saw them together yesterday, too. I'll bet they're always together when they're out on the open plain. Undoubtedly, you are wondering why." "Undoubtedly," Thorne said. "The reason," Levine said, "is that the apatosaurs are very strong but weak-sighted, whereas the parasaurs are smaller but have very sharp vision. So the two species stay together because they provide a mutual defense, just the way zebras and baboons stay together on the African plain. Zebras have a good sense of smell, and baboons have good eyesight. Together they're more effective against predators than either is alone." "And you think this is true of the dinosaurs because it's rather obvious," Levine said. "Just look at the behavior. When the two herds were alone, each clustered tightly among themselves. But when they're together, the parasaurs spread out, abandoning their former herd arrangement to form an outer ring around the apatosaurs. Just as you see them now, that can only mean that individual paras are going to be protected by the apatosaur herd, and vice versa. It can only be a mutual predator defense." As they watched, one of the parasaurs lifted its head and stared across the river. It honked mournfully, a long musical sound. All the other parasaurs looked up and stared too. The apatosaurs continued to drink at the river, although one or two adults raised their long necks. In the midday heat, insects buzzed around them. Thorne said, "So where are the predators?" "Right there," Malcolm said, pointing toward a stand of trees on the other side of the river not far from the water. Thorne looked and saw nothing. "Don't you see them?" "No." "Keep looking. They're small lizard-like animals, dark brown, raptors," he said. Thorne shrugged. He still saw nothing. Standing beside him, Levine began to eat a power bar. Preoccupied with holding the binoculars, he dropped the wrapper on the floor of the hide. Bits of paper floated to the ground below. "How are those things?" Arby said. "Okay, a little sugary." "Got any more?" he said. Levine rummaged in his pockets and gave him one. Arby broke it in half and gave half to Kelly. He began to unwrap his half, carefully folding the paper, putting it neatly in his pocket. "You realize this is all highly significant," Malcolm said, "for the question of extinction. Already it's obvious that the extinction of the dinosaurs is a far more complex problem than anyone has recognized." "It is?" Arby said. "Well, consider," Malcolm said. "All extinction theories are based on the fossil record. But the fossil record doesn't show the sort of behavior we're seeing here. It doesn't record the complexity of groups interacting." "Because fossils are just bones," Arby said. "Right, and bones are not behavior. When you think about it, the fossil record is like a series of photographs, frozen moments from what is really a moving, ongoing reality. Looking at the fossil record is like thumbing through a family photo album. You know that the album isn't complete. You know life happens between the pictures, but you don't have any record of what happens in between. You only have the pictures. So you study them, and pretty soon you begin to think of the album not as a series of moments, but as reality itself. And you begin to explain everything in terms of the album, and you forget the underlying reality. And the tendency," Malcolm said, "has been to think in terms of physical events, to assume that some external physical event caused the extinctions. A meteor hits the Earth and changes the weather. Or volcanoes erupt and change the weather. Or a meteor causes the volcanoes to erupt and change the weather. Or vegetation changes, and species starve and become extinct. Or a new disease arises, and species become extinct. Or a new plant arises and poisons all the dinosaurs. In every case, what is imagined is some external event. But what nobody imagines is that the animals themselves might have changed, not in their bones, but in their behavior. Yet when you look at animals like these and see how intricately their behavior is interrelated, you realize that a change in group behavior could easily lead to extinction." "But why would group behavior change?" Thorne said. "If there wasn't some external catastrophe to force it, why should the behavior change?" Actually, Malcolm said, behavior is always changing, all the time. Our planet is a dynamic, active environment. Weather is changing, the land is changing, continents drift, oceans rise and fall, mountains thrust up and erode away. All the organisms on the planet are constantly adapting to those changes. The best organisms are the ones that can adapt most rapidly. That's why it's hard to see how a catastrophe that produces a large change could cause extinction, since so much change is occurring all the time anyway. In that case, Thorne said, what causes extinction? Certainly not rapid change alone, Malcolm said. The facts tell us that clearly. What facts? After every major environmental change, a wave of extinctions has usually followed, but not right away. Extinctions only occur thousands or millions of years later. Take the last glaciation in North America. The glaciers descended, the climate changed severely, but animals didn't die. Only after the glaciers receded, when you'd think things would go back to normal, did lots of species become extinct. That's when giraffes and tigers and mammoths vanished on this continent, and that's the usual pattern. It's almost as if species are weakened by the major change, but die off later. It's a well-recognized phenomenon. It's called softening up the beachhead, Levine said. And what's the explanation for it? Levine was silent. There is none, Malcolm said. It's a paleontological mystery. But I believe that complexity theory has a lot to tell us about it, because if the notion of life at the edge of chaos is true, then major change pushes animals closer to the edge. It destabilizes all sorts of behavior, and when the environment goes back to normal, it's not really a return to normal. In evolutionary terms, it's another big change, and it's just too much to keep up with. I believe that new behavior in populations can emerge in unexpected ways, and I think I know why the dinosaurs— What's that? Thorne said. Thorne was looking at the trees and saw a single dinosaur hop out into view. It was rather slender, agile on its hind legs, balancing with a stiff tail. It was 6 feet tall, green-brown, with dark red stripes, like a tiger. That, Malcolm said, is a velociraptor. Thorne turned to Levine. That's what chased you up in the tree? It looks ugly. Efficient, Levine said. Those animals are brilliantly constructed killing machines. Arguably the most efficient predators in the history of the planet. The one that just stepped out will be the alpha animal. It leads the pack. Thorne saw other movement beneath the trees. There's more. Oh, yes, Levine said. This particular pack is very large. He picked up binoculars and peered through them. I'd like to locate their nest, he said. I haven't been able to find it anywhere on the island. Of course, they're secretive, but even so. The parasaurs were all crying loudly, moving closer to the apatosaur herd as they did so. But the big apatosaurs seemed relatively indifferent. The adults nearest the water actually turned their backs to the approaching raptor. Don't they care? Arby said. They're not even looking at him. Don't be fooled, Levine said. The apatosaurs care very much. They may look like gigantic cows, but they're nothing of the sort. Those whiptails are 30 or 40 feet long and weigh several tons. Notice how fast they can swing them. One smack from those tails would snap an attacker's back. So turning away is part of their defense? Unquestionably, yes. And you can see now how the long necks balance their tails. The tails of the adults were so long they reached entirely across the river to the other shore. As they swung back and forth and the parasaurs cried out, the lead raptor turned away. Moments later, the entire pack began to slink off, following the edge of the trees heading up into the hills. Looks like you're right, Thorne said. The tails scared them off. How many do you count? Levine said. I don't know, 10 to 12. I might have missed a few. 14, Malcolm scribbled in his notebook. You want to follow them? Levine said. Not now. We could take the Explorer. Maybe later, Malcolm said. I think we need to know where their nest is, Levine said. It's essential, Ian, if we're going to settle predator-prey relationships. Nothing is more important than that, and this is a perfect opportunity to follow. Maybe later, Malcolm said. He checked his watch again.
No.
That's the 100th time you've checked your watch today, Thorne said. Malcolm shrugged. Getting to be lunchtime, he said. By the way, what about Sarah? Shouldn't she be arriving soon? Yes, I imagine she'll show up any time now, Thorne said. Malcolm wiped his forehead. It's hot up here. Yes, it's hot. They listened to the buzzing of insects in the midday sun and watched the raptors retreat. You know, I'm thinking maybe we ought to go back. Go back, Levine said. Now? What about our observations? What about the other cameras we want to place? And I don't know, maybe it'd be good to take a break. Levine stared at him in disbelief. He said nothing. Thorne and the kids looked at Malcolm silently. "Well, it seems to me," Malcolm said, "that if Sarah's coming all the way from Africa, we should be there to greet her." He shrugged. "I think it's simple politeness." Thorne said, "I didn't realize that, No, Malcolm said quickly. "It's nothing like that. I just, maybe she's not even coming." He looked suddenly uncertain. "Did she say she was coming?" "She said she'd think about it." Malcolm frowned. "Then she's coming. If Sarah said that, she's coming. I know her. So, what do you say? Want to go back?" "Certainly not," Levine said, peering through binoculars. "I wouldn't dream of leaving here now." Malcolm turned. "Doc, want to go back?" "Sure," Thorne said, wiping his forehead. "It's hot." "If I know Sarah," Malcolm said, climbing down the scaffolding, "she's going to show up on this island just looking great." Cave. She struggled upward, and her head broke the surface, but she saw only water, great swells rising 15 feet above her on all sides. The power of the ocean was immense. The surge dragged her forward, then back, and she was helpless to resist. She could not see the boat anywhere, only foaming sea on all sides. She could not see the island, only water. Only water. She fought a sense of overwhelming panic. She tried to kick against the current, but her boots were leaden. She sank down again and struggled back, gasping for air. She had to get her boots off somehow. She gulped a breath and ducked her head under the water and tried to unlace the boots. Her lungs burned as she fumbled with the knots. The ocean swept her back and forth, ceaselessly. She got one boot off, gulped air, and ducked down again. Her fingers were stiff with cold and fright as she worked on the other boot. It seemed to take hours. Finally, her legs were free, light, and she dog-paddled, catching her breath. The surge lifted her high, dropped her again. She could not see the island. She felt panic again. She turned and felt the surge lift once more, and then she saw the island. The sheer cliffs were close, frighteningly close. The waves boomed as they smashed against the rocks. She was no more than 50 yards offshore, being swept inexorably toward the crashing surf. On the next crest, she saw the cave, 100 yards to her right. She tried to swim toward it, but it was hopeless. She had no power at all to move in this gigantic surf. She felt only the strength of the sea sweeping her to the cliffs. Panic made her heart race. She knew she would be instantly killed. A wave crested over her. She gulped seawater and coughed. Her eyes blurred. She felt nausea and deep, deep terror. She put her head down and began to swim, arm over arm, kicking as hard as she could. She had no sense of movement, only the sideways pull of the surge. She dared not look up. She kicked harder. When she raised her head for another breath, she saw she had moved a little, not much, but a little to the north. She was a little nearer to the cave. She was encouraged, but she was terrified. She had so little strength. Her arms and legs ached with her effort. Her lungs burned. Her breath came in short, ragged, heaving gasps. She coughed again, grabbed another breath, put her head down, and kicked onward. Even with her head in the water, she heard the deep boom of the surf against the cliffs. She kicked with all her might. The currents and surge moved her left and right, forward and back. It was hopeless, but still she tried. Gradually, the ache in her muscles became a steady, dull pain. She felt she had lived with this pain all her life. She did not notice it anymore. She kicked on, oblivious. When she felt the surge lift her up again, she raised her head for a breath. She was startled to see that the cave was very close. A few more strokes and she would be swept inside it. She had thought the current might be less severe around the cave, but it wasn't. On either side of the opening, the waves crashed high, climbing the cliff walls and then falling back. The boat was nowhere in sight. She ducked her head down again, kicked forward, using the last of her strength. She could feel her entire body weakening. She couldn't last much longer. She knew she was being carried toward the cliffs. She heard the boom of the surf, louder now, and she kicked again, and suddenly a huge swell swept her up, lifting her, carrying her toward the cliffs. She was powerless to resist it. She raised her head to look and saw darkness, inky darkness. In her exhaustion and pain, she realized that she was inside the cave. She had been swept into the cave. The booming sound was hollow, reverberating. It was too dark to see the walls on either side. The current was intense, sweeping her ever deeper. She gasped for breath and paddled ineffectually. Her body scraped against rock. She felt a moment of searing pain, and then she was swept farther into the depths of the cave. But now there was a difference. She saw faint light on the ceiling, and the water around her seemed to glow. The surge lessened. She found it easier to keep her head above water. She saw hot light ahead, brilliantly hot, the end of the cave. And suddenly, astonishingly, she was carried through and burst into sunlight and open air. She found herself in the middle of a broad, muddy river surrounded by dense green foliage. The air was hot and still. She heard the distant cries of jungle birds. Up ahead, around a bend in the river, she saw the stern of Dodson's boat, already tied up to the shore. She could not see any of the people, and she didn't want to see them. Summoning her remaining strength, she kicked toward shore and clutched at a stand of mangroves growing thickly along the water's edge. Too weak to hold on, she hooked her arm around a root and lay on her back in the gentle current, looking up at the sky, gasping for breath. She did not know how much time passed, but finally she felt strong enough to haul herself arm over arm along the mangrove roots at the water's edge until she came to a narrow break in the foliage leading to a patch of muddy shore beyond. As she dragged herself out of the water and up on the slippery bank, she noticed several rather large animal footprints in the mud. They were curious, three-toed footprints, with each toe ending in a large claw. She bent to examine them more closely, and then she felt the earth vibrating, trembling beneath her hands. A large shadow fell over her, and she looked up in astonishment at the leathery, pale underbelly of an enormous animal. She was too weak to react, even to raise her head. The last thing she saw was a huge, leathery foot landing beside her, squishing in the mud, and a soft, snorting sound. And then, suddenly, abruptly, exhaustion overtook her, and Sarah Harding collapsed and fell onto her back. Her eyes rolled up into her head, and she lost consciousness. Dodson. A few yards up from the shore of the river, Louis Dodson climbed into the custom-made Jeep Wrangler and slammed the door shut. Beside him in the passenger seat, Howard King was wringing his hands. He said, "How could you have done that to her?" "Done what?" George Basilton said from the back seat. Dodson did not reply. He turned the key in the ignition. The engine rumbled to life. He popped the four-wheel drive into gear and headed up the hill into the jungle, away from the boat at the shore. "How could you?" King said again, agitated. "I mean, Jesus." "What happened was an accident," Dodson said. "An accident? An accident?" "That's right, an accident," Dodson said calmly. "She fell overboard." "I didn't see anything," Basilton said. King was shaking his head. "Jesus, what if somebody comes to investigate and—" "What if they do?" Dodson said, interrupting him. "We were in rough seas. She was standing at the bow. A big wave hit us, and she was washed overboard. She couldn't swim very well. We circled and looked for her, but there was no hope. A very unfortunate accident." "So what are you concerned about?" "What am I concerned about?" "Yes, Howard, exactly. What the fuck are you concerned about?" "I saw it, for Christ's sake." "No, you didn't," Dodson said. "I didn't see anything," Basilton said. "I was down below the whole time." "That's fine for you," Howard King said. "But what if there's an investigation?" The Jeep bounced up the dirt track, moving deeper into the jungle. "There won't be," Dodson said. "She left Africa in a hurry, and she didn't tell anybody where she was going." "How do you know?" King whined. "Because she told me, Howard. That's how I know. Now get the map out and stop moaning. You knew the deal when you joined me." "I didn't know you were going to kill somebody, for Christ's sake." "Howard," Dodson said with a sigh, "nothing's going to happen. Get the map out." "How do you know?" King said. "Because I know what I'm doing," Dodson said. "That's why, unlike Malcolm and